Meeting to order on this Thursday, March the 20th. Start with the introduction of commission members, starting at the far right.
Greg Sheets, member. Mike Denapoli, secretary.
Cindy Kirkoffer, vice president.
Terry Dill, president. Introduce the other members at the table, please.
Brian Bosma, city attorney.
I'm Mike Shaver from Wabash Scientific.
I'm Brad Bingham with Barnes & Thornburg. We serve as bond counsel.
At this time, you've all received copies of the minutes. At this time, I entertain a motion to approve them. If there are any additions.
I'll make a motion that we approve the August 2nd minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Old business, project updates. Ms. Kirkhoff.
Greenway? I can't remember what my last report was, so probably the same, but end of February, I met with Schneider and a couple of residents that live in Park Meadow, because it turns out as they're in the final stages of planning that greenway, that there are a couple of tricky bends in the creek. One makes for a very tight bridge crossing, and so for the benefit of the residents, we wanted to meet with them and get their cooperation and approval of what we do with the bridge there behind Park Meadow. So at that time, they were working, Schneider Engineering was working on the final details of the planning documents. And once those are completed, then they will be submitted to NDOT for review and approval. And then we start the process.
Thank you. Any questions for Cindy?
What do we mean by a tight bridge crossing?
At one point in time, the thing that was most advantageous to do money-wise was to relocate the creek. So it's just kind of twisty and turny behind Park Meadow, and you have to have so much clearance, and you don't want to, bridges are so expensive, you don't want to span a large area. So we were going to relocate the creek and take care of that through human resources, but that's not possible. So right behind, there was a house in Park Meadow that was for sale for quite some time. I don't know who the owner was. They have a in-ground pool with a tiki-like hut. I think it fell into the hands of an estate. Maybe the couple is deceased. But anyway, the creek is very close to the back of their property. And so instead of a normal bridge going from point A to point B, it is very likely that a bridge behind their house will need to be a 90-degree bridge. So from the Carson's Farm area, it comes straight across to the residents' property in Park Meadow, and then from there it takes a sharp 90-degree turn to go back in front of the Masterson's former house and head back north into several. So it can't be just a straight line bridge crossing. It's straight and 90-degree turn.
Any other questions for Cindy? Mr. Denapoli, Main Street.
Well, I may recap a little bit because I think it's been a few meetings that we talked about my particular project, and as many of you know, we delivered a 3D model that's posted up on the website on the front, Better Brighter Beech Grove. You just have to scroll all the way down the page to find it a little bit. You might want to highlight it a little bit or a better area, but from that model, since then we produced that model, we received a $4.6 million grant from the federal government, I guess, arm of the federal government. And now we are formulating another focus group. We've had 2 meetings with some of the vendors who will be involved, Schneider, Crossroads Engineering, and Mr. Dave Klingen. We've all sat down and strategized what processes need, or project timelines we need to set, and find out exactly what time frames we're going to have these meetings, and we're going to formulate another focus group and pull in some additional merchants. We've lost a few people through attrition and non-involvement, and we want to put together a group of 6 to 9 people to spearhead the next process, which hopefully by September we'll get to a point where we'll put that out bids, I believe, for the construction phase. So stay tuned, because we'll try to post a lot of that information up on our website.
Any questions for Mike? I did get an update from Mr. Gilberti on Digital City and what's going on there. To let everyone know, Federal Signal is working with IPL still to identify poles for the implementation of the devices, the actual devices. In fact, they're working with Mr. Mike Pence, our city councilman, IPL, and actually moving ahead. I know we've said that, but we should see something within the next month, and I think Mike would agree to that, that we're going to see some actual equipment hanging on poles. With that, we promised last month that you would see a pricing package, and we do have pieces of that, and it's going to be posted on the website. And I will tell you, the basic residential package will be $9.95. So if you want to write that down, that's where we're going to start. So, and that will get you the same speed as a T1 line to your home, which is instantaneous.
Ratification.
Yeah. I'll move my lips. You talk.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So we should see that real soon, and I think that $9.95 comes in where it's going to be real affordable for a lot of Beech Grove residents. With that, that concludes our project updates. This time we'll move into new business. With that, I would like to ask Mr. Shavers to give us an introduction to the development block grant.
Do I need to go there, or can I stay here?
You can stay here, that's fine.
All right. The Community Development Block Grant, the Small Cities Program, the Community Development Block Grant Program, is funded nationally, but the state gets the money at the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. That grant was awarded, and the grant is now in the process of expiring. We have therefore decided to bifurcate the process. The draft of the Comprehensive Redevelopment Plan is ready. We are going to have a public hearing tonight for the purposes of the grant. This will be, this public hearing will be in addition to the 4 workshops that we're working on with the City Council trying to get scheduled. That will also be public workshops and a public hearing on the part of the City Council in order to approve the comprehensive plan. So by the time we're all done with all of the public workshops and all of the public hearings, we will have had roughly 300% to 400% of the requirement of the statute. The public hearing tonight is about the comprehensive redevelopment plan. The executive summary was presented previously to the City Council and to you guys. We have also had, as you know, the workshops on the individual things. The projects haven't changed, the strategies haven't changed. All that we're trying to do at this point in time is to solicit additional public input, and then, as we said before, bring the council up to speed, and in as much as most of the process happened before they were seated, bring the council up to speed and then determine if there are adjustments needed to this process. Next week, tonight, the comments of the public will be received. Any necessary responses or adjustments to the comprehensive redevelopment plan will be made. Next week, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs will receive a preliminary draft copy for their comment. That is also in excess of the minimum requirements. In most cases, I am told, they get them in final approved form and simply sign off on them. They don't have the chance to comment themselves. But we're going to give them that opportunity since we have the ongoing workshops, and then fold whatever comments they give us into the workshops so that we can tell you guys what the state is doing. The reason we're trying so hard to make them happy is that in the long run, there are grants of up to $500,000 every year that are available for things like community or neighborhood redevelopment, Main Street redevelopment, and a whole range of things. There are three goals of the act that have to be addressed when you apply for this money federally. They are prevention or elimination of slums and blight, housing rehabilitation, public facilities. They must principally benefit low and moderate income families, which we've talked about here and talked about in general a couple of times, that several neighborhoods in Beech Grove should automatically qualify. And in fact, it is possible that if you took out like 3 neighborhoods in Beech Grove, it is possible that the whole city would qualify for this, which would mean then that the Redevelopment Commission could, as they move forward, use TIF revenues to match grant funds in order to leverage the TIF revenue and get more impact out of this, like you've done for the Main Street program and like you've done for Greenway. Next week when we submit it, I will then follow up with, submit it to OCRA. I will then follow up with them for any additional comments, and the comments will be included in this. Then it will wrap up, the process will wrap up after the workshops and after the final public hearing that's held, by I believe, by the City Council under statute. Is that good enough? You have something else I should have said? Okay.
At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for the Community Focus Fund Community Development Block Grant for the Comprehensive Plan. We have one person that's signed up, Mr. Dave Grenoble.
Actually, I have some questions. I don't know whether we can do that now or whether I'm supposed to. I think free money's great. My question would be, it seems like with every grant that we receive, and maybe it's a government issue, there has to be a matching, some type of fund or some kind of money put up either by yourselves or the city. Is the RDC or the city going to have to come up with any money with this grant?
No. The answer is no. We received.
For this grant that we're doing now?
Yes, sir.
No, you put up, the city put up $5,300 for 50,000, roughly speaking, 49, 48, something like that.
Which we already spent, I believe, correct?
I haven't done the accounting, so I don't know about that.
Is there anyone else like to speak? This time I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'd ask Mr. Bingen to introduce the declaratory resolution for Group B properties. And I want to make a point that this declaratory resolution, by us approving this or however way it goes, pushes this to the City Council for their approval or disapproval. So that everyone knows the process here. So.
I'll keep this relatively short and sweet. I mean, Terry pretty much said it. This, what is before the commission tonight is what's known as the declaratory resolution for what we've just described as the Group B parcels. Under existing law and as it would change in the future with this new legislation, there's 3 steps required to expand a redevelopment or an economic development area. First step is to adopt a declaratory resolution with an amended plan and maps attached thereto. As Terry said, it then gets forwarded to the City Council for their approval or disapproval. And then the third step would be to hold a public hearing after which the Commission could either decide to adopt it as is, to confirm it that is, to amend it, or to take no action at all. So again, this is the first step in the process. Nothing is final at this point. Changes can be made if public input warrants taking such action. And with that, I'll let Mike Shaver talk more about the actual parcels and areas that are being added at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Shaver? Can everyone see that?
Yeah. I can lift that up with a couple of files. Is that necessary to make anybody's vision better? Can I use your file here, Brad?
Yeah.
Probably. There we go. Got the wrong guy focusing it. I'm not sure that my eyes even focus. That doesn't. That's good. We wanted to talk about the Group B amendments particularly. There seemed to be a lot of questions the last time that we wanted to get around. The or wanted not to get around, we wanted to address more completely. Would you push that one?
I'd be happy to. Up there if you want. Okay.
There are 4 areas being added to Group B. Those 4 areas, go ahead, are the Main Street right-of-way. The right-of-way itself has no dollars of assessed value and no property tax generation. There are approximately 70 parcels along Main Street, plus 230 parcels counting a block, 1/2 block north and 1/2 block south. The purpose of adding this is to make it completely clear to the legislature, and I don't know how many of you followed the legislature's rhetoric the last time, in the last session, but there was a lot of rhetoric coming from the Senate side particularly. The House had nothing to do with this. In fact, the House might have been the one that kept it from getting silly, but the Senator Kennelly, who is from Hamilton County, was upset about what he felt Carmel was doing, and in that money was being captured from other areas and spent in the downtown area. What we're doing here is designating Main Street so that we can use TIF matching funds on the $4.6 million, $4.5 million is what I had heard, which is about a between 3 to 1 and 4 to 1 match for the Main Street project. The second thing is the Greenway. That also has, and a part of this is on the map, that also has approximately, or has 0 of assessed value currently. It includes portions of 2 parks and then the area along the creek, Lick Creek, I believe. 160 properties along the Greenway. There's $1 million grant funds, $1 million in grant funds plus $1 million in TIF, roughly speaking. We're talking about a 1-to-1 match. So all told right there, you've got about $6.5, $7.5 million. Is that right? 4.5 million plus $1 million. That's $5.5, $7.5 million total in leverage funds. The third area is the landfill sports park reclamation. That also has no AV. It's been donated to the city, correct,
yes.
Councilor? We counted approximately 60 parcels adjacent. They're almost all on the south. In fact, they're all on the south side. The rest of it is like railroad property around it and that sort of stuff. And the BGRC is prepared to seek future grant funds for that. But the purpose of that is to convert that former landfill into a sports park. You wouldn't mind? The one that is being added here is the St. Francis. Now, the hospital facility, which is the part that's closing, has 0 AV. There's negative impact on the neighborhood when it's closed. We talked about that during the workshops that we had. There are approximately 430 adjacent parcels. I think the exact number that we counted was 434. But there's a potential to use the incentives to encourage redevelopment, and use TIF incentives to encourage redevelopment. What we're worried about, if you went into the workshops, is, and I think we said this at the last 2 meetings, if the space goes dark, it will have an immediate impact on the commercial areas that are immediately surrounding and the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it. There was a gentleman that came to the workshops that who in fact had said that he was concerned because his property was losing value. It was assessed at lower values even now. I don't know that that was because of or what the exact reason for that was. All told, there's a total of 950 adjacent properties affected by the Group B redevelopment projects and strategies. And there's the AV is $0 that is being, for the core part that's being designated. The only additional property that has AV is the commercial area around St. Vincent's, which is dependent upon, and I'm sorry, Cindy, you gave me the numbers and I forgot. There were 20, how many employees?
Approximately 2,200.
2,200 employees and approximately 300 beds. And those 2,200 employees plus the families of 300 people have an impact on that commercial area that's immediately adjacent, we believe. If you disagree, that's perfectly okay. We consider that do nothing, not designating this is an alternative, but it carries a high price tag because we're concerned that we don't want it sitting there vacant. That's what it boils down to. We just talked about the $5.5 million in reconstruction costs on Main Street. There, in addition, we believe that there could be a spin-off, conservatively speaking, of about $1.5 million in enhanced assessed value of the properties that are adjacent to Main Street, not the buildings themselves necessarily, the Main Street buildings themselves, although they would be part of it. But in addition to that, the people who live immediately behind the alley, north and south of Main Street, and I think we said it was a 1/2 block north is what we counted. That's a conservative estimate based on a roughly a $5,000 a property, I think is how it worked out to be. Some of the properties are worth more, some of the properties are worth less, so that it would be more than $5,000 for some and less than $5,000 for others. In addition, the construction of the Greenway, we've given a rough conservative estimate of approximately $800,000, $0.8 million in enhanced AV, plus the $2 million in construction costs for the improvements behind. This is, I believe, to be about 1/3 of the increase that was experienced for the Monon Trail. The reason I haven't increased it at the level of the Monon Trail is because this particular trail is just Beech Grove and it doesn't connect to other cities and things like that. So I scaled it back just to try to make it so that it was something that we felt comfortable saying that was true. The reclamation of the landfill, when it happens, we believe will generate something about $300,000. You know, the question that somebody posed to me after one of the workshops was, you know, well, I'd much rather live next door to athletic fields and a park than to live next door or across the street from a landfill. I understand that rationale. It's hard to assess, but again, we've estimated that with that group of parcels, roughly $300,000. All of those three, the $300,000, the $800,000, and the $1.5 million, is an increase in personal wealth. And in fact, if you own any of these houses or any of these houses in these areas, those are increases that you should see in the value of your property as a result of improvements that are made to the city of Beech Grove. Now, the redevelopment of St. Francis is an either-or situation. If it goes dark, we talked about this at length, if it goes dark, there's going to be an impact that's going to be hard to get back. If we can find a way to get it done without going dark, then we believe that the redevelopment of the St. Francis facility could not only not lose money, but could make another $2.15 million in new enhanced property values. All of these things go back to the issue that we talked about with the schools. Several folks, I think John was one of them, met with some school board members. The mayor testified that the school's #1 problem is declining AV, and that's exactly what we're trying to approach and trying to deal with in this particular thing. We believe that declining AV has two impacts. #1, certainly the school loses money because it doesn't have as much tax base. But more importantly to that, the individual people that have families, especially the ones that have kids, have a declining assessed value as well. And basically the increase in school costs is an increase in the proportionate cost in taxes of their value of property. Hit escape up in the upper left. Okay. Our strategy, the BGRC strategies, are trying to take steps to reverse the declining AV problem all over town. We talked about the fact that if we can generate TIF revenue in the industrial areas, we can use it to rehab streets and things in neighborhoods, things like that. So if we're successful in doing this, the entire community benefits because of the increase in assessed values. I think that's basically the long and the short of what we're trying to do with this particular Group B set of properties. There is assessed value for the commercial areas designated around St. Francis. But there is no AV in the Greenway, there's no AV in the Main Street, and there's no AV in the landfill reclamation. So those things being said, I'll answer any questions that you guys have up here.
Any questions for Mike?
I do. Mike, I have a couple questions. I had a phone call today from someone who felt that a resident who felt that their house might fall in a TIF district, and I presume that means with a half block north and south of Main Street.
That's not part of the designated TIF district.
Okay.
No. The only thing we're claiming we're doing in Main Street is the right-of-way itself. But the impact of getting new businesses on Main Street, the impact of getting, well, is it the gym down there that has sandbags in front of the thing because water goes in the front door? When we were talking to other folks, there were people that were saying out of the alleys, there was water running into the back sides of buildings and things like that. The only thing being designated in the TIF area is the right-of-way. So there is no house that should fall in a TIF district. And in the St. Francis area, it is just commercial property and right-of-way in addition to the campus.
Okay. And then another one, and I'm not,
And even if it did, there would be no impact.
no impact on the
those-
homeowner.
On the homeowner.
Okay,
That's right.
that was the
I'm
No
primary.
impact on the homeowner.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
And just, I don't know who the proper person is to ask, maybe it's Jeff, with the new local property tax reform legislation that was passed this week, how do you weigh the benefit of putting St. Francis into the TIF area and using the benefit of the AV funds that improve versus leaving it there to potentially fund when a for-profit business, or I don't know about for-profit, when a tax-paying business, property tax-paying business takes over, hopefully, and that would generate property taxes to help fund our public safety. How do we weigh the benefit of which is better? Capture those funds to pay for our public safety, or capture those funds to redevelop our community?
Well, I mean, you guys will get the opportunity to decide those things as each time it goes along. You will see the project before it happens. The primary reason for the designation of St. Francis is to try to keep it from going dark. It's not necessarily to capture any money, although it could very easily do that. I just don't know the restrictions. I mean, my only understanding, and I'm not part of the loop, is that there are some restrictions on what the order has said they would allow in there, and if that doesn't include the thing it was designed to do, then you obviously have a certain limited market. But if those things come in, you five get to decide how much of that is necessary to make the project work and how much is not. I do have, and you have brought up a good thing, I have here a preliminary draft of the tax impact analysis. It is only narrative at this point because there are preliminary draft of the tax impact analysis. It doesn't have any, excuse me, I didn't mean to. It doesn't have numbers in it at this point in time because there is no assessed value. You're not losing anything. You're not redirecting anything. The only thing that you've got that has any future potential of generating any tax revenue inside of these areas is St. Francis. And you can choose to designate that or not designate that based on the projects that you get, based on what you find from the public. If it would be okay with you, can I give these other four, or other three, I need one myself, to some of the folks out there?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Commission members have any other questions for Mike?
Yeah, I've got one, I believe. Mike, in one of our meetings, I think that you attended, we communicated, there was some communication, clarification of where we could use TIF funds, and I think it was pertaining to the Park Grove area, and I think out of that meeting was communicated that. And can we get that clarified, that where we can use TIF funds?
I think absolutely you need to have that clarified. What I'm doing at this point, and Brad may have a better sense of this than I do, but what I'm doing at this point is sitting down with the lawyers for all of my clients that have TIF revenue and determining exactly what kinds of interpretations are necessary in order to come up with a solid answer to that. I believe that what we have tried to do here is to designate the areas in which TIF funds could be spent. Okay? Clearly there's not going to be $1 of TIF generated by the Greenway. Clearly the Main Street right-of-way is never going to generate any property taxes. The same goes for the Greenway. Clearly the landfill is not going to generate property taxes. So we've got three areas there that we're only designating them so that we can spend TIF money there as match. And what we're trying to do here is to protect the fact that you've spent $1 million in order to get $5.5 million on Main Street. Am I clear on that?
So those areas we designate are available for grant money as opposed to not being in a TIF area.
Right, we're trying to, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, under the way that the Redevelopment Act reads now, TIF, incremental property taxes that you capture, can be used on projects that directly benefit or serve the TIF area. Okay, so there's always been that kind of this pushing the envelope. How far away can you get from the TIF area to justify using those funds? Under the legislation that was just passed, it has been clarified such that you can only use TIF dollars on projects that are physically connected to the TIF area. And so I think what Mike, the point he's trying to make is Mike's saying is that, look, if you don't include St. Francis in the TIF area at this time, and somebody comes along and kind of says, well, hey, we're gonna need some infrastructure improvements and stuff, you can't use the TIF dollars to fund that without having it be part of the TIF area. So I mean, that's, and I think what Mike's saying is like, we're doing this so that a lot, for these federal grants, a lot of times there's a local match component. And in order to spend that component on something within the city, that grant has to, it was going to be used in some way. You've got to have that be part of the TIF area. Right. So that's why the Greenway becomes part of it, even though there's no AV. It's why the Main Street becomes part of it, no AV. It's so that you can use those TIF dollars to combine it with that grant funding on that area.
Can I amplify just a little bit, just to make it, I'm going to say the same thing practically Brad said, just a little bit differently. As you know, as we've been planning the expenditure of TIF funds, both Barnes and Thornburg and our firm formulated a preliminary opinion under the old statute that you could go pretty far down Main Street and still benefit the TIF area, which ended at Emerson Avenue. The new legislation has made it clear that that's not the case, and you can't spend the money in the area unless it's in the TIF area, which is why the 3 non-producing properties are there to assure that you have the ability to expend TIF funds in those particular areas. So
That's exactly right. I didn't want to, I mean, theoretically what could happen, and I don't think it would ever happen, but theoretically what could happen is somebody could come back after the fact and have an audit, say, well, the Main Street area is not in the TIF, therefore you couldn't have used TIF dollars for match, therefore you weren't entitled to the $4.5 million, therefore please write us a check for $5.5 million. The point of all of this is to try to make it so that you're complying with the law in its letter and its intent, and to make sure that those things work. Now, you mentioned Park Grove. The Community Development Block Grant Program nationally has a clause in it that says if an area is within a redevelopment area, as defined by state statute, then you can automatically spend funds, that the project is automatically eligible. So what we may have to do if we were to go and do another neighborhood besides Park Grove is to designate another right-of-way in order to do streets, in order to match 100,000 of your money with $500,000 of community focus fund money to do the streets in that neighborhood. But what we're trying to, with all of this, what we think we've got with the way Main Street cuts across and the way the phase 1 of the Greenway cuts across and the way Emerson Avenue is, that we believe that we can get to pretty much any place we want with a fairly short run in order to fund these, to make it possible for you to leverage these dollars into grant dollars. You've done a great job on this, by the way. In fact, I used you guys as an example this morning in Franklin. They have TIF revenues that were used originally, committed for their several industrial projects. The industrial projects have now been paid off. They have excess revenues, and they've got a downtown project. They're basically going after the same basic thing that you guys are, except they're designating the whole downtown, and because they've had a downtown study done, and they've got lists of projects that they want to do. They're basically going exactly the same direction that you're going with Group B.
Mr. Chairman, can I amplify one other item in answer to Ms. Kirchhoffer's question on the, and I've clarified this with Brad to be sure. All you're doing with this declaratory resolution is declaring the St. Francis is what you have as an allocation area. That means it's eligible for TIF designation and allocation later. Okay, so yes. You're declaring it as an allocation area, which means later you can capture any tax increment dating back to, I guess it would be this March 1, the assessed value as of this March 1. You wouldn't have to capture it all. You could capture half and let half pass through in the fashion that you said, or capture it all, or 10%.
That's so exactly what I was asking.
Yeah, that'll be a decision that you can make later. This just makes it eligible in the future, and the date that the increment is measured from will be March 1, 2008. The assessed value as of March 1, 2008.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mike?
Mike, did we also include the building Alverno, and are they directly part of St. Francis? Do we know, are they leaving with St. Francis?
I don't know what Alverno is.
I do. I do. Yes, it is in, St. Francis has approximately 20 acres, and in the far south southeast corner is a freestanding standalone building. I think it was built about 1980-ish, and it houses St. Francis's IT department for all 13 of their campuses.
It's a nice two-story building.
And as far as we know, it is, well, to date, it is not being offered for sale with the rest of the campus. Alverno desires to stay there.
But is it being captured?
It's being cut out of the sale of the property. However,
Looks
It
like
is
it's
included.
within
Is it in-
the declaration area, it looks like.
and that Alverno is a
I
joint
think it's
venture that
within
the
the
sisters
declaration
own.
area. I think it's, is it this building right here? Something Is that
Like
building
that's
right
Yes,
here?
Exactly.
yes.
That's
Okay,
a
so-
ready-made building. I mean, it's a nice two-story structure, good parking, relatively new building. Seems to me like that's a building that we should make sure that's also in that area. It doesn't make sense that St. Francis would leave and go to South Campus and not take their record-keeping people with them, or maybe they will.
That is IT only, and they said that that building is so well structured to serve the IT for all 13 of their hospitals that they just can't see leaving that facility. But you're right, it should still,
Now,
Be part
the
of the
question, I guess the next question is that St. Francis? Is that a separate building, or is that a separate company that keeps records for that hospital, other hospitals? Is it a taxable?
I believe it's part of St. Francis Network.
it's a joint venture. The sisters are one member, and I don't know who they are.
Trying.
No, you're doing great, and I would rather have her
I guess I
answer
should
because you got a much
explain.
better chance of getting
Yeah,
the
I work in the
stuff on
legal
St.
department.
Francis right than to ask me. I don't know that much about St. Francis.
But the reason I ask is it's just such a ready-made structure. If they leave, that's something that really doesn't require any redevelopment. It becomes a nice, viable business that was at one time a non-taxpayer that could become a taxpayer overnight with a new tenant.
And if they're not going to vacate it, why would we include it?
Well, the only,
We don't know the future.
this is a
We don't know that,
defensive,
Yeah.
now, this is a defensive move more than anything else. I'm just trying to keep us from, I mean, if you guys decide that you want to cut out those little commercial areas around there, it's just that when people aren't there with somebody in the hospital to go walk, I can't stand being in the room anymore, I want to walk and get a sandwich or a cup of coffee, that's a different, that's what's keeping a big chunk of that churning. So, any of those designations, any of those areas that you want out, we can certainly adjust.
Well, with that building, it really doesn't make sense not to have it in there irregardless, because we don't have to go through the exercise again of capturing it later. St. Francis is getting bigger and bigger. They're building in Lafayette, which means they're probably going to need more IT people, which ultimately means that the building's not going to be big enough. So they may leave for that reason alone, and we should have it in this.
You pointed out some really interesting things here. I heard that they had an IT partner in the process, but I didn't know about the structural part of it. The interesting part of it, from our standpoint, is we're really interested in knowing more about how much physical space is required for IT in order for it to double, triple, quintuple its capacity. And from what we're hearing, based on talking to people that do the IT stuff, the ability to increase your capacity 100 times sometimes requires adding 10 square feet of some cooled room somewhere to make sure that the servers don't get too hot. So I don't know what the actual answer is to that, but again, you guys will be able to choose which projects you're going to let money roll through, which ones you're not, and how much you're going to help them. We're basically, in the Fort Benjamin Harrison project, when we did this, every building was considered separately because they were all going to be sold separately, and that's kind of the approach we used here.
Could we determine whether it was actually in or not?
Brian thinks it's in the southwest corner, southeast corner.
In the corner and wall.
It's right actually in the parking lot.
Yeah, there's a
It looks like
parking
that's the
lot on
building right
west,
there.
on the east side too. Yeah, they've got it here on over here, right here. That's the building right there.
That's
And this is their parking lot, so they even got that drawing. This is where employees park.
There again, this gives us the ability to declare it as part of the TIF area. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen. I think it warrants more discussion on whether it would happen or not.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If we should determine that it's not in the declaration area as described before the redevelopment commission, can that be changed at the council level, or do we know that?
We'd have to look at that. I mean, I think
check,
it's
yeah.
one of those things like the scope. I mean, if we're scaling down, I would see that's not a problem at all. But if we're kind of doing something after the fact that wasn't contemplated before,
Gotcha.
then it may be a little problematic.
Okay, well, we'll look, Mr. Chairman, we'll double check the legal descriptions and see that they match up to what's depicted here.
Any other questions by the commission? I'm going to go a little out of the norm before we vote on this declaratory resolution and ask if there's any comment from participants here this evening. I've saved that till the end, but I'll ask now if there's.
You said the St. Francis property is 0AB, but the professional tower in that area is taxable properties because those are held by private. So is that taken into consideration?
Yes, the determination was that since this was a defensive designation, that we were trying to make sure that we gave the this community the best chance of having St. V rehabilitated without going dark, or redeveloped without going dark. Our feeling was that a 300-bed hospital with 2,000 employees, if it went dark, would have an impact on the professional building, would have an impact on the video store, would have an impact on the Starbucks, you know, and all the rest of it. We put it in because, as Brad pointed out, shrinking the thing is an easier thing than re-advertising in order to make it bigger. So, is that a fair? Did that answer your question, Tim? Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Real quick.
It's 6 one, half dozen of another, whether it seems like that if you wait to put this property into a TIF, you can use it as negotiating for anybody that's interested in buying or taking over that property, that we're going to put you in a special TIF fund and help you with things while you're making changes. And it doesn't really matter because there's nothing that's going to be lost or gained if you put it in right now this minute, other than maybe a negotiating ploy. But I had a question, I believe it's Brad. You made the statement that if it's put in the TIF fund, once somebody takes over the building, if they need to change something with the infrastructure, then you guys can help with that. So when you put a business in the TIF zone, they can ask you for money for help?
They could, but they're under no obligation to help them at all. I mean, I see your point. What you're saying is that, you know, in terms of the leverage and that being available, but they have no obligation at all to use any TIF dollars there. And at the same time, this is what Brian mentions, is, you know, if you put it in a TIF area, it sets a base assessment date, and then the incremental growth over that they could capture. However, they can also, I think it's July 15th, they can make a determination and say, no, we're going to pass that through to all the overlapping taxing units. So it just gives you maximum flexibility in terms of what your options are in the future.
Okay. And then, Ms. Shea, just real quick, are we going to be able to get a copy of your comprehensive redevelopment plan before the public hearing or before it goes in front of the council?
Yeah, the document, the executive summary should already be there. The stuff from the preliminary draft for OCRA will be available next week. I thought I already said that, I'm sorry. But yeah, there's no problem with that. The council and the redevelopment commission have examined incremental pieces of it as we went through. It probably hasn't been all pulled together, but we can get that in electronic form, I think, onto the website, can't we? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, we'll do that.
Then one more quick, and then I'll just announce someone else can have it. You were part of the group you mentioned several times working with Warner Wiley. And in 2002, there was a comprehensive redevelopment plan that was put together with maps and strategies. Were you guys able to use any of that in what you're trying to accomplish now, or did we start all the way over?
There was no comprehensive redevelopment plan under Warner Wiley. There were two separate redevelopment plans, one for what we called Amtrak, was it called Amtrak Conrail at that time?
I think so.
And now it's called Amtrak CSX, and one for South Emerson Avenue. They were separate and distinct. One of them was commercial and the other one was industrial. Since then, we have gone up Emerson Avenue to join them and then bring them all together into one consolidated, integrated, whatever you want to call it, plan. All of the stuff that is being done now is based on those original two plans. But it also brings in the Starro-Kinsella project that you guys did with that had proposals for every street in town. It brings in all the amendments to the redevelopment area that we have done in 2007 and 2008. And then it will further talk about reorganization of city resources to make sure there's an ongoing effort and what's going to be done in the money with whatever money there might be unobligated left over. So it lists all of the projects. It tells exactly what the steps are for the projects and what kinds of activities the city should anticipate having to do in order to help get redevelopment to occur at CSX, the Rock Pile. Emerson Avenue is pretty much done, Main Street, that sort of stuff.
Thanks.
I just, on the landfill, and I know they're putting dirt over it, and it's really nice. I understand that's all free, and they're doing the work for free, and that's great. But originally, that was going to be part Beech Grove and part Morehouse. Do we now have all that to play with, or does Morehouse still have part of it?
Morehouse still owns.
Okay.
Yes.
So what do we have, 18 acres? Is that what it was?
I think we had a discussion about this today, and I couldn't find the survey.
Okay.
I think what we have is 26 acres, and they have 10, and I'm sorry, I can't answer. I was involved in the transaction.
We can try and get that up? My understanding is they can't build on it.
Yeah, there have been those discussions, and they intended to build a facility there.
Right.
Part of the covenant that they entered into that it's affected the property is that the Department of Environmental Management had to be there for any below surface excavation. They were present, and the landfill reached further than the Morehouses believed, and the area they planned to build a building on actually also contained landfill, which at this point in time did not appear to be buildable without excessive expense. There's a way to build on it with spreader footings, but they aren't cheap. So at the moment, the Morehouse's plans are on hold. They have at one point expressed the possible transfer of that property to the city, but they would have to find another facility to expand.
But even though they couldn't build on it, we could still do the sports parks and everything there, right?
They don't require the extensive foundations that a building would. It'd be mostly above surface, and so you can, with the cap that's being placed there and the cap that was in great part there before, you could do parking lots, you can do athletic fields, that type of thing. But can't go 6 feet to sink a footer.
Thank you.
These three parcels you're putting in there, if I heard you right, are non-profit generating properties. I guess my question would be, is if we're putting these properties into TIF, what happens if there's a shortfall on what we are able to use to pay these projects off? If we don't have the money, who's this going to fall back on for the payments?
Well, you already have the money. The money was mostly floated out of the bond issue, but you already have the cash that you need, I think, to cover all the current obligations. The question is, and what we will try to get to as we have the workshops of the City Council, is how much unobligated money is there, and under what circumstances would it stay unobligated, and then what what decisions criteria that the City Council would want to place on the Redevelopment Commission to keep from having a shortfall. So at this point in time, if everything were to go exactly as it's been recommended, you're going to get an annual allocation based on what the accountants say, working with the county auditor, what the accountants say is unobligated funds. If the council says you can obligate X number of dollars, then that comes out of that. The other stuff is all going to be a cash-as-you-go operation. And that's one of the problems it's not a problem, but one of the things we have to do, because the town doesn't officially have, Carmel has 4 people on its redevelopment staff. The town doesn't really have a redevelopment department, so we're trying to figure out how to make that work with the Department of Public Works. Sam's going to handle it all out of his bank account.
In his spare time.
In his spare time, yeah.
The
Does
only
that answer
short-
your question, Dan?
sorry.
I'm sorry.
The only shortfall that is there at this point would be the Main Street renovation, and that's in 2 years, and we need the funds for our $1.5 million match in 2 years.
But at some time during, while we're doing redevelopment, I mean, we need for these funds to start generating money somewhere along the line. I mean, at what point, or how far out have you guys looked at this where it becomes a point where it's not at least a break even?
Let me take a shot at it. All that can be captured in the allocation area that's been declared today is an increase in assessment. Okay, an increase in assessment will have to occur for that capture in any bond issue to happen. Okay, so let's say someone places a large development at CSX, that could be captured, and there'd be no shortfall. I mean, that's only the increased assessment can be bonded. Same thing with St. Francis. Someone comes in and says, we're putting a large for-profit facility here, then that assessment goes up to private sector assessment, and that increase can be captured and bonded. So I don't quite see where we're getting a shortfall.
Yeah, I think what you're raising is a distinct issue in terms of, adding these 3 areas that are, there's no property taxes being generated from those. That is a totally separate issue from, I think what you're getting at is you're looking at, do we have sufficient cash flow to pay for these projects? And that is something, since there's already bonds outstanding, we've made the promise to those bondholders that we'll maintain a certain coverage ratio in terms of what we have to pay them versus what's coming in the door. And so that always has to be looked at for everything in the future.
So you're understanding that in the bonds, they have to have more than enough money to pay in order to provide a cushion. But in addition, there will be additional money coming in from new development that's going to take place. The question with the city council is what kind of obligations and under what circumstances are they willing to make obligations for future activities. And so that's what's going to be talked about when we sit down with the workshop, so that you're absolutely on board with that, and the redevelopment commission knows then what they want.
St. Francis, you're taking in that whole area right there, correct? You're talking the parking lot, the professional building, one up on top, and all that other stuff. Are we taking what the gerbil tube's connected to also right across the street? Is that going to be part of that?
The gerbil tube.
Gerbil tube.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So we're going to be capturing that also then?
Right.
Correct. And so we're going to be able to do all.
When you say capturing it, it causes me to flinch because
it's being designated as an allocation area. We haven't captured anything yet, but it would be eligible for capture in the future. And it looks like it's in there, Joe.
Yeah.
So that's part of the St. Francis plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
By doing all this stuff, are we anticipating taking out another loan or anything, or do what we have coming in now and all the funds that we have going on now, would that be all we need for this?
All the funds we have now are projected to pay for the projects we have at hand, and we're stable there. We're fine. The future, I can't predict the future and what's going to happen in the future. I don't know. Have we tested the bond market? Have we went out? No. But
Now, another question on that, since we're talking finances. With the taxes going the way they are, what are we anticipating? I mean, it's different. One time they come out and they say, okay, we're going to have 3 payments this time. And then all of a sudden, last thing I heard, they're pushing it back to 09 when we're going to get the next 3 payments done. Or is this a catch-up thing, or what's going to happen since this is so dependent on the taxes and all that other stuff? I mean, that's all questionable too, isn't it?
Yeah, again, it doesn't impact anything that's happening tonight.
Well, that's kind of off the subject here.
I mean, I'll tell you, it is a mess. It is. We will have in Marion County a 3rd property tax bill, a reconciliation bill, we paid 2006 tax level in 2007, and we got to pay 2007's after the assessment. I don't know when that's coming out, but it's coming out at some point this year, plus your normal May and November. May's going to be delayed, so yeah.
But understand,
I'll chat with you about that afterwards, Joe.
Understand, Joe, that the TIF revenues did fine, despite the fact that there was a mess, because the TIF revenues didn't have any increase in in the required amount of money that had to be put in. So when he said pay the 2006 revenues, that's all that anybody projected as being necessary in the first place. So I think we're more than safe. But the thing I handed out extras of to you guys over there is a preliminary tax impact analysis that says that we will have for Group B, but the Group B one, but because it's predominantly not-for-profit, the only thing that we believe that the most likely alternative here is that if St. Vincent's goes dark, that there will be a loss of property. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, did I say that again? I apologize. If St. Francis goes dark, that there will be a higher likelihood that the surrounding property will lose some sort of market value. And that will, but none of that is included in any of the TIF revenues at this point. It will only affect what you might be able to offer in incentives for St. Francis. I'm going to be stuttering over that for the next 2 years. But it will only affect things that are in the future. So they'll have to, if it goes down $100,000 in assessed value, and that ends up being a $2,000 or $3,000 a year loss, that has to be made up by whoever is coming into the, whoever might come into the campus to redevelop it. The best thing that can happen is for St. Francis to not leave, but then all that means is that everybody stays the same as they are now. So there's no real upside to this unless there's a massive redevelopment that is very different than what's currently there.
Now, St. Francis stayed, and you put them in a TIF, you could still help them if they wanted to?
They don't pay any taxes. So, I mean, you could help them, I suppose, but I'd send them to you to get a check written.
Real quick, thank you. Just wanted to check on the status of the Amico property, the .80 acres down on Emerson Avenue that was in the original Group B that was proposed to the council, I believe, included the Amico property. I don't recall seeing that as part of Group A, and obviously it wasn't in tonight. Are we anticipating that to be sometime in the future, or am I?
It is in Group B.
It is in Group B.
It is in Group B.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, and I think the Burger King property is also,
No,
right?
Burger King's in the last one.
Oh, well, this is the Amico right here. Was that in the last one also?
It's on the map. I don't remember it being in either one of these. There was no.
It was,
I don't remember where it went with the lawyers.
Yeah, my recollection is it's in Group A. It was at the last meeting, and I know the Amico property was brought up.
We could be wrong on that one. That one could have slipped through the cracks.
We'll get you an answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. At this time, commission members, you have before you the consideration of the declaratory resolution of Group B properties. At this time,
I had a question, if I could.
okay.
Just a clarification, because I sort of heard two different things, and I was.
Could you stand up so we can see you on camera?
I just wanted to clarify something from Brad and Mr. Bosma. I think you said that designating stuff in the TIF zone, the new law and the old law, the changes, and that would be, how do I say this? I think you said, Brad, that it had to be physically connected to the TIF area or in the TIF area, and you said that it had to be in the TIF area, and I didn't know which one to go by.
The new legislation says it has to be
Inside and not just physically
Well,
connected?
It has to be,
clarify that.
the new legislation, it used to say that the TIF funds could be used for certain things that are directly benefiting or serving the TIF area. I mean, that's so that left this vagueness in terms of how far geographically could you go and spend the TIF dollars. Now it's been changed to say that you can only use the TIF dollars on projects that are physically in or physically connected to the TIF area, if that makes sense. So like, I mean, just,
Okay, I just wanted
you know,
to make sure.
yeah, like a sewer pipe, you know, connecting to the area, you know, I mean.
Yeah, there's some question about what connected to means, and I sat at the table and I can tell you there is a question about what connected to means. So the safest interpretation is it must be entirely within. That isn't to say that 6 months from now, Brad or our firm or somebody else says, you know, we've decided physically connected to means it's right outside, but the property is right on. Okay, but the safe interpretation is
And
within.
just one other clarification. I was under the impression that the NDOT grant for Main Street was 80-20 matching. So I'm not real sure. I mean, 20% is $900,000, so I don't know where we get to $1.5 million.
I'm not sure it was an 80-20 match.
That was just my understanding, I could be wrong.
I wish I could give you a nice, clean, straight answer. The NDOT projects will declare, that you, on eligible costs, you have to spend 20% and they will spend 80%. But you have to cover 100% of the ineligible costs. So they might have declared, I had nothing to do with this project, they might have declared $500,000 of it, 600,000 of it not eligible for their participation.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys not limiting us to 3 minutes and letting us ask all our questions and get answers. I really do appreciate that.
Okay, commission members. You have before you the consideration of the declaratory resolution for Group B properties. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I thought it was brought up last time.
Is there a motion?
I would make a motion that we accept the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
The declaratory
The
resolution.
declaratory resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any other business from the commission members? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the claims.
I have just a few questions on these, but they're not really for the meeting notes. Can we accept these with exceptions, Council?
Yeah, you can make amendments to it right now, if you'd like. If you'd like to change something, or do you feel like there's an inaccuracy?
I have some markups on a few things. Can we accept them as amendments?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
I just have some markups on some of the bills.
Oh. I see. Yeah.
Nothing like small items.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to approve it with the exception of the numbered items?
11217.
Okay, so approve them all with the exception of 11217.
A-OK.
Is that what you'd like to do?
Yeah.
You can do that, if that's what you like.
I think we forgot.
Well, you can approve everything except 11217. If that's what you'd like to do.
Is there
It's a
anything I can
motion.
explain? Self-explain?
You just move to approve the claims docket with the exception of item 11217.
I'll make that motion.
Do you mind, I would like to see where we're not,
Yeah.
we're excluding.
They're completely minor items.
We're going to hold this one, 11217.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I just wanted to know which one we were going to exclude. 11217.
Yeah, this is different than that.
No, actually, you were talking, there's more than 11217.
This is the current.
Do you want to approve them excluding those two amounts?
Oh, the expense. So you pay fees and expenses.
Yeah. I just want to amend them.
Although it.
And it's
I mean, I
that
suppose we
in
could.
the legal description that's there now.
Because that's fine. I agree. But, well, it really is. I mean, we could approve the fees and.
Yes, we can.
And go back and look to make sure we're right about the contract. I think that's what we should do. I think we should pay the fees, hold out the expenses, and add them to our contract to make sure we're really off.
You can.
Well, let's just change it.
Subtract that amount, make
Yeah.
approval for the dollar amount.
Yeah, if you can do that, I'll make a motion that we accept it as amended.
Just wait till we get the dollar amount. She's a human calculator.
No, I'm not.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Actually, I don't know, just. No.
It's in the contract.
$80 an hour. I think that's the Beech.
I'm sure.
I'm trying not to let anybody.
It's up to you.
Folks know about it.
I rather look, I mean, I agree, I know that there is something in there about that, but I want to see exactly what expenses are.
So you can approve it without approving the expense.
Yeah, so I'm changing the dollar amount, and it'll just be a second.
If you want to go ahead and make that motion, that we approve it without the expenses on item number
11217.
11217.
I'll make a motion that we accept the bills as amended, with the exception to bill number 11217.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Can I clarify something?
Certainly.
Mike produced a new map here that reflects some corrections in the legal description. So it's different than the one I had from the last meeting. Is this the what is the name?
Alverna.
Alverna? Is that the building we're talking about?
Yes.
So that's in the corrected description.
Looks like it is.
Yeah, okay, good. I just wanted to clarify before we were done.
Okay, at this time, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.